Hey guys, this is going to be a talk through of the Regional Yajilin puzzle from the Puzzle GP Round 1 in 2020. Eugene Porter asked for a solution or help with this, so I'm just going to give a talk through of how I approach it. So the first thing to really know is that in any given 2x3 block, you cannot have 3 shaded cells, because you can't shade shells adjacently, and so you'd need a checkerboard, and then there's nowhere for this line to go. As a combination of that, or as a follow-up to that, I should say, if you try to put 4 in a 3x3 box, you end up with this, which forces a crossing line, and that doesn't work either. So with this information in mind, the largest amount you can put in this box is 5, which we need 5 in, well, this 2 with the 5. So also, if we come over to this bottom corner, it's very restrictive. You can only put, at most, 5 shaded cells into this box. So then the question becomes, well, where can we put them? After marking the corners, because if you try and shade one of these, it just fails. If you look at this cell right here, if it's shaded, then we'd need to put 4 in this box, and that doesn't work. And because we now know there's one in this spot, we can shade a cell here, draw this line, and get to this state. And because we know we can't put 3 in this box, put 1 here, and we can add 2 more. Drawing the follow-up lines, there's another Yajilin deduction you can do. If you try to shade this cell or any cell in a similar path where there's a line, and you know it can only go up or left from here, then shading this cell would force it to go both up and left. And so here and down here are both unshaded. The next step is with this 4. Because now that we've marked these 3 cells as part of the path, we now know that we cannot put 4 shaded cells in this box, so we put 3 in this box. And in fact, this means we must place 1 here, which I'm going to mark with this X. And if we take a closer look at the 4 up here, then we cannot shade 2 cells on this line, which means we must shade 1 on this line and 1 on this line. I'm trying to remember the next step. I believe we can do a similar deduction down here. In fact, we can do a similar deduction with this 5, where there's 11 cells in this region. And as we know, we cannot put 4 down here, so we must put 2 up here. Conversely, we must put 2 down here, which also means we have 1 on this line. However, if we look at this 1x2 box, then regardless of which cell gets shaded, either this one or this one, well, actually it's even simpler than that due to that cell just failing, but both of the options for this shaded cell will unshade these cells, which is very useful in Yajilin. And that creates a bit of a feedback. This is a corner, so it cannot be shaded, and we'll notice that we get to this state. There's another quick deduction on this cell. If it's shaded, it forces this one to be shaded, which forces that 2x3. And what's the next step? I'm doing this a lot slower than I did during the contest itself. Yes. So now we have this region, which is a little harder to see in this presentation because the 1 is down here. One of these 2 cells is shaded. However, if we shade this cell up here, let's just see what happens. So this one would have to be shaded, and all of a sudden, we're just up here, and we've got a branch line, and the branch line doesn't work. So this cell is not shaded. This cell is shaded, which means this cell is also shaded. So we're close to something interesting happening, but we're not quite there yet. So one maybe not obvious deduction has to do with this cell with the 2 in it. If it's shaded, let's just look at what that does to this bottom corner. We end up with a total of 3 lines entering this little region, and since 2 of them will connect, no matter how they connect, there's just one loose line. And so, because this cell can't be shaded, we now get this position where we cannot shade 2 in this box without isolating this cell. So we have to shade the cell in the corner, which gives us another shaded cell. And one of these two, we don't know which, except you might remember we made that deduction in the top right on this line, which unshades this cell. And that gives us something interesting. We now have a corner, which gives us this shaded cell. And here we can see that no matter what we do, we need to cross this border twice. Which means we need to pass through this column twice. That is not immediately helpful. And we can't quite do anything with this 3 yet, simply because this is a possibility. Well, actually, is that a possibility? So if we look at this 3, we try and put the 3 shaded cells in this 3x3 box. This is the only way it can be done. And as soon as you do that, we isolate this line. And so that gives us a shaded cell in row 4. Now, we must have one here. This is a corner. This is also a corner. So this is the shaded cell there, and one of these two is going to be shaded, which gives us this line. Coming back over to the 4, if we consider this cell, then it can work. In fact, this does work. Sorry about scrolling there. Did not mean to do that. And then if we hit check, this is correct. But why is this correct? So to answer that, we're going to consider this cell right here. And we're going to look at what it does. It creates that branching pattern. So now we know this one, which gives this. And similar to the deduction we did down here with this 1x2, we can do a similar one with this 1x2. If this cell is shaded, well, this one's unshaded. And if this cell is shaded, then we get this path, which means that regardless of which cell is picked here, this one is unshaded, which gives us a shaded cell. And then trying to see why this cell fails is a little harder. But you'll notice that it forces a shaded cell here, and then this path. And we're still passing through here twice, but look at what happens. We have 2 entries to this area, so in order to avoid closing the loop for as long as possible, it would end up still closing the loop. And so what that means, this step's a bit hard to see, is that this cell must be our shaded cell. And that gives all of this. And with that, we have solved the Regional Yajilin. I hope that was helpful. This is a pretty fun type. It was a very nice puzzle. I greatly enjoyed solving it. That's all for now. Later.